Welcome to Turn a Page, the official comic book club for Nerd Initiative. Each week, the NI Bullpen will be covering the world of comics, talking to creators, deep diving into some fantastic stories, and much more. Now let's hand it over to the team and turn a page.
Welcome to a very special edition of Turn a Page, the official comic book club for Nerd Initiative. My name is Ken M. You know me as the host of the ODPH podcast. I'm also Nerd Initiative editor-in-chief. Joining me from the Sanctum of Awesomeness, I believe is the official title of it, and because it's in his own contract, he has to do his own intro.
Coming at you live and direct straight from the Sanctum of Awesome. My name's Off the Cuff Tom, Nerd Initiative's pop culture connoisseur. Ken, Kyle, always a pleasure.
Absolutely, and we said special edition because finally the wait is over. Since October of 2024, fans have been waiting on bated breath to see about the next phase in the modern superhero classic that comes out from comics' most exciting universe, the Massiveverse. And the wait is finally over. February 26th. You have to make sure you should have had it pre-ordered by now. But in case you didn't, you better be running to the comic shops because Radiant Black 31 is hitting the shelves. And we have a lot to discuss about it. And we were fortunate enough to have a guest on that knows a little bit about that character and then some. You know his work from No One, KYLE 1964, and of course, the one and only Radiant Black. Please give a warm welcome to the one and only KYLE Higgins. Kyle, what is going on?
How's it going, guys? Thanks for having me. That was a killer intro. I love it.
Thank you.
Your check is in the mail.
Did my job.
And did we get paid?
Well, we have to talk to the GEO about that. But speaking about doing their jobs, Kyle, this is a masterpiece to my left. And obviously coming out of one of the most game-changing events in comics in more ways than one, because the Catalyst War was an event unto itself. But when we had Michael Basudal on last year, it was during the time of a vote that the closest thing I could recall to it is the Jason Todd vote from Batman way back when. And you literally put the life of your franchise in the fans' hands about who would be Radiant Black, Nathan Burnett, and Marshall Ward. We have to talk about this. So how did this whole vote come about?
Well, it was in the DNA of the project really from the get-go. Very early on when we were planning Radiant Black, I think we had the first couple issues written, and this is before issue 1 ever came out. I remember taking a night at this pizza place near me that just went out of business, unfortunately, that did Chicago style deep dish. And I was sitting at the bar in my notebook, and I was just kind of doing a thought exercise of like, all right, I want to break across. I shouldn't say thought exercise, like this is how I work actually. I was like, I'm gonna break, like, all right, if I let me see if I can figure out like what 3 years look like here. And so just some of the moves across year 1, and then year 2 would kind of look like this. And then year 3 would be our big event. But also, if I do my job right in years 1 and 2, this book is actually secretly like a two-hander. And if I build these characters right, then the idea of who is going to take over the mantle could actually be a feature rather than a bug. And that's really interesting to me. And so much about what we were trying to do with the book and continue to try to explore comes back to, the idea of immersion and really trying to capture that feeling of like magic that I grew up feeling and experiencing with so many books and different pieces of superhero storytelling in different mediums that I don't feel like things are quite the same anymore for a variety of reasons. And so there was something about that got me really excited. And then it was a short walk from there to, well, the real way to do this, especially considering Radiant Yellow would be, really central to it all, and his ability to perceive different timelines and different permutations of the way things might unfold, felt like exploring this as a multi-timeline event where we were leaving the choice up to readers and putting them in the driver's seat, but then also using that to drive this split timeline approach so that you could actually experience and see what would happen for each character that was being voted on, as we then built it all into, the finale and ultimately the one final Radiant Black that would be our main character going forward. I didn't quite know how we were going to do it, but I felt really confident that we could. And so that's where it all kind of stemmed from. And then it was literally like 4 months later. Let's see, the book launched in February of 2021. So that's February is issue 1, March is issue 2, April, May, June. So issue 5 was either about to come out or had just come out. And I was having dinner with Eric Stevenson, Alex Cox, who's the director of the head of direct market at Image Comics, and Emma Kubert, who subsequently did Radiant Pink with us. We were having this awesome dinner in Washington during the Washington Summer Con. We went out to this really cool restaurant, like right on the water, and it was like, it's June, so long days. Like we had this perpetual sunset until like 9 o'clock at night over the mountain. And I pitched Eric this idea about not only the vote, but then splitting the timeline. And he thought it was awesome. And that was June of 2021. So this goes back a long way. Yeah.
Wow, that's
crazy.
incredible.
Now, with having that much, prep time and trying to figure out everything, to get your stepping stones, were you surprised by the outcome in any particular way? Like, one way or the other? Because, oh man, I put so much into this and I put so much into that, and then, oh, we're going this way.
No, I mean, I knew that. I said it from day one. I was like, Marshall's going to win the vote. And that's with no knock on Nathan at all. It's kind of obvious, especially when you leave the choice up to fans. It's like he's on the surface a more dynamic character because there's more chaos there. So it's a lot of the Nathan stuff is a little bit more internal. And Marshall is this, big extroverted, extra personality. And so, of course, a reader is going to naturally gravitate towards like that being more fun or more exciting to read. And the thing that makes me laugh is when people say he's a better character and like his arc is better. And I want to it always makes me chuckle when I see that, because it's like, dude, he killed 200,000 people.
Yeah.
Like, you keep saying his arc is better. You don't know where this is going. Like, you have no idea. So I think in the traditional sense, an arc would be better, but I don't know that we have done anything traditionally up to this point in the series. So I knew that that was probably who was going to win the vote. The vote was really, really close, though, like really close. At no point was it a wider margin than a 60-40 margin.
Oh.
And it ended even closer than that, like much closer than that. So
like double digits or
there was some
digits?
No. It may not have been double digits. It may have been single. I mean, it was really close. And yeah, but you heard more about Marshall because everyone who voted for Marshall just shouted from the rooftops, which, by the way, is a very Marshall thing to do.
Yes.
So t-shirt,
but
Marshall thing to do.
I early on, I did have, there was some story direction stuff that we were working on where, there were some things that we were talking about doing where the vote absolutely would have still mattered and everything, but the narrative direction might have been, I don't know. It was early stages that we were playing around with some other alternatives that I'm being a little vague here, but I don't want to, we didn't end up doing it, so I don't really want to dive into it. But what I did find, and I talked about this in other interviews, that was a little bit of a surprise was that when we did get the final results, like I was really excited about like, okay, we know what we're gonna do, we know where this is gonna go. It's gonna be Marshall as Radiant Black going forward. Like I'm really excited about what that unlocks, what that book's gonna be. But I did also find myself like a little bit bummed out for a few days, and I couldn't quite like put my finger on why. And then I realized it was like, oh, because it just means like I'm in a weird way, it's like I'm grieving the book that I'll never be able to write. Like the version where Nathan is Radiant Black. And that's because I had a big plan for that as well. And it's like, oh, well, that's just not gonna happen now. And I don't want to do a what if or anything like that. It's more just like that's just not what the future is. And then I got over it, and I'm really excited again about what we're doing going forward here.
Well, it's a testament to the characters you've made and how they've connected with the audience to have a vote that close. And especially Nathan and Marshall have both won over the fan base, which you think about when we've had successors to mantles over the history of comics, like that is very
Sure.
hard to do. So you kind of actually just stole my next question because I was going to say, would there ever be like a Nathan Years one shot or something like that? But with everything focused on Marshall, I mean, do you really think there's even a need for that then?
No, I mean, it's not yeah, I don't know. Like I have a weird feeling about that kind of stuff. Like when you say Nathan Years one shot, you mean like if Nathan had stayed, or do
Yeah,
you mean
if Nathan
like
had stayed, just because, like, I know, like, and just because when I think of the vote, like, I instantly just go back to the Jason Todd thing, and I know
Yeah.
recently DC came out with Robin Lives, and it was kind of a quick short story about like what happened with Jason Todd if he stayed and survived
right?
that. It was like, would there ever be something like that with Nathan?
No, honestly, I hate that stuff, if I'm being totally honest.
Oh, that's fair.
Like,
That's
and I
cool.
say that as somebody who, like, I mean, I've written plenty of alternate timeline stuff. I mean, obviously, there's kind of I mean, it's our take on an alternate timeline type story here in Radiant Black. But for whatever reason, for me, like, especially with, what is it? So I'm figuring this out, how I feel about this, like on the fly, on the spot. Why do I bump on it? You know what it is? I think that when you go down that path, and this was something I worried about with the Catalyst War, to be honest, a little bit, which was that if you're not careful, you just become, or the book or this world just becomes this like multiversal exploration where it's hard to have stakes that really, I don't know, I don't want to say resonate, because you can absolutely have stakes across multiversal stories that resonate. It's more like it's harder to maintain that world outside your window component when you're diving deep into like multiversal, like what could have beens. And that's not to say that I know I'm kind of talking out of both sides of my mouth here, because it's like there is something fun about exploring that. And obviously, the yellow radiance entire mechanism is about perceiving what could have been and what might be. But I also feel like we limited perspective on that stuff so that readers only really were aware of what Nathan and Marshall were aware of. And then with the occasional caveat, they were aware of like what Wendell was aware of, but not in the broadest, sense of everything. And I just worry that like the second you get into like publishing the equivalent of like what if stories, or this is the alternate ending that could have happened, it's like I just feel like you've run out of ideas. And I think on like established brands, it's natural and inevitable to tell that kind of story. And there's nothing wrong with it. But you're also talking about, in the case of Marvel and DC, like companies that have been around for decades telling hundreds and thousands of stories with characters who, by and large, kind of stay the same, by necessity. And so you're constantly looking for new ways to mine interesting kind of like narrative wells, and also get people to come back, for more without really changing things too drastically. And I feel like what we're doing as creator-owned books, in particular with the Massiverse stuff and Radiant Black, I feel like we have a responsibility and an obligation to change things for our characters to move on and sometimes, I mean, certainly change, but sometimes die. Sometimes new people take up the mantles. Like, I'm not really interested in the undo buttons in that way, because I feel like we have this incredible gift that has been given to us, which is the opportunity to do anything we want to do without the constraints of prior continuity or decades of, published backstory and things like that. And it's just like, if you're not taking advantage of that now, then I don't
Right.
really know why you're doing this, Yeah.
No,
So
that
I'm
makes
just not in a hurry. I'm not in a hurry to dive down that rabbit hole of like, let me, I don't know, let me inside baseball iterate on ourself to tell you the what could have been, I don't know.
no, that makes perfect sense, because the reason I was thinking that too is like with the vote being so close. You think
Hmm.
about like you were kind of thinking, okay, either one of two things are going to happen. If we were going to go with Nathan, this would be the story we would go with, and that, and it's just kind of like, oh, maybe we'll see it someday. But obviously, the one thing you did, and I like how you touched upon it too, is you guys are always very forward thinking, no matter what it is, with like the concepts and the characters. I think that's one thing that has been one of the strengths of the Massiverse. And seeing that too now coming out of the Catalyst War, it's like getting everybody's attention back on Marshall, and now thinking basically what we can do next, and that's where we're kind of heading with issue 31.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of a bold new era. It's something we've been working on behind the scenes for quite some time. We, have been off stand since October when we put out issues 30 and 30.5 as the finale to the Catalyst War, but we haven't stopped working here, since. We've been cranking on issues, trying to get a little bit ahead, carving out what exactly the next 1 to 2 to 3 years are going to look like. And then also taking some time to start building up different assets so we can communicate not only with readers, but retailers exactly kind of what we're doing here, that we are in a new era. We're starting with, really great new jumping on points, both for Radiant Black and Rogue Sun. We're calling it our rebuild era. And we've got a bunch of little, I don't even want to call them tricks, but tricks up our sleeve with regards to some different general awareness things that we're going to be doing here as we try to, spread the word of Radiant Black and the Massiverse, and this return to on time and monthly comics that are very right now, very, very world outside your window. And, telling stories where hopefully you don't see what's coming next.
No,
So
absolutely.
that sounds exactly like where I wanted to lead to, and you even brought in the whole idea of the retailer stuff with the rebuild story. How is it that either the Massiverse is going to expand in and of itself on the paneled pages, but you breadcrumbed here, so I'm going to go with it. What can we talk about retail even? I mean, are we going to start getting some merch, some T-shirts? Am I going to see a Hasbro helmet or something? I mean, I know you got the ones behind you, but
Um, well, we do have helmets. Like they were made by Star Child Props.
love their stuff.
So yeah, they're amazing. Andrea, I met him when I was doing Power Rangers actually.
Yes, that's
So
how
he
I know.
did the yeah, he did the, I don't know if you can see it on camera. He did the Radiant Black, but also the gorgeous Infernal Girl red helmet we have over here as well. Well, I would say like on the specifically on like what the like I guess merchandise side and everything, like no, we don't really have anything super huge or concrete to like really tease or talk about. We're doing a big Massiverse fighting card game that just came out through and in partnership with the great team at Solus Game Studios. So that's actually in comic stores right now. And then I believe you can buy it through Solus directly. It was a Kickstarter that they are I actually don't know the best place to buy it outside of through your comic store at the moment, but it's available. Like it's out there. You can find the links online and everything. That's kind of the only big thing outside of the books themselves and the upcoming audiobook for Radiant Black. But our big focus is just on getting the books back, to a consistent release schedule. So everything is back on time and monthly now. We'll take a month off in between the last issue of an arc and the first issue of the next arc. And in that month, there will be the trade paperback for the previous arc. That's how we're scheduling things right now. But my whole thing is like, these are our two, like Radiant Black and Rogue Sun are the two, bellwether books that are going to be there carrying the load every month. And then Infernal Girl Red will be coming back with book 2. It's done. We're like sorting out getting it printed right now for the Kickstarter backers as a hardcover. But the softcover edition and the serialized monthly chapters that we'll do again for book 2, those will be coming out in a little later this year. So it'll probably be in early summer is what we're slotting right now. But yeah, outside of that, like I just want to make sure that we're back and we are on stands for a considerable amount of time consistently before we really start talking about doing anything else that's like, outside of that. I mean, there's stuff behind the scenes that we're talking about and some meetings we're having and things like that are always interesting. But the focus really is on the return to, being on time and monthly. And then everything else that we're doing is really, especially with retailers, is really in support of that. So if you follow us on our Black Market newsletter, and then certainly on Instagram, and even we actually started a TikTok as well as a Massiverse YouTube channel. We've been releasing a bunch of content that some of it is old things that we've already made, like the Radiant Black versus Blaze short film, but like reworked for vertical, video clips and things like that. Again, just trying to get the word out to more people on the platforms that they use that like this, we've done all this cool stuff, try these books. So we're doing more of that kind of stuff. And I think we're also going to do, I know we're going to actually start doing more live streams. So something that Michael Basudel, Matt Groom, and I had a lot of fun doing when I was writing Power Rangers was the Ranger Danger Boom Rooms, where we would do essentially, an hour plus long podcast episode every month for that month's comic book release, talking about that issue and breaking down, different behind the scenes things on it, talking through the story. It's kind of like a director's commentary. So we're going to bring that back with Radiant Black and Rogue Sun here, and then subsequently Infernal Girl Red. But we're actually going to do it as live streams. And then we will turn around and put that out not only as an audio edition, but we will also cut up all that material for clips that will get out there on social and some of those platforms I just mentioned. Again, ahead of, or I guess in between each issues, dropping, and just trying to create a little bit more content that helps people stay engaged and hopefully find the book if they haven't checked it out already.
Yeah, like I said, you guys are always so first step ahead of everybody about doing that, and especially engaging on the social platforms. And speaking of the card game, I will just say as a shameless plug, stay tuned to Nerd Initiative this week because we have an announcement involving that and a little more things going on with the Massiverse in celebration of Radiant Black 31, but can't give that away just yet. But speaking of issue 31, we're 5 months after the Callus War. What else can we talk about the issue?
What were your feelings about our first issue back in the rebuild era?
Tom, you want to go first?
So just prior to you coming on, I was talking about some things I noticed in the artwork specifically that is making me question stuff. And that's all I'm going to allude to because I really want readers to go out and pick this up and see if they can theorize and go down the rabbit hole I'm with. I'm not going to ask you while we're live. I'm going to catch up on the side. So that one got me. There's something there was a lot of action that made me go, that doesn't look great in a good way.
Okay.
I was very impressed with it because especially how Marshall is dealing now with the burden of what has happened, the fallout from the Cowboys. And I think seeing how it's being told to him and how he's interpreting it, I think has been very fascinating. plus the new character that we see at the end. I have my theories, but I don't want to say them while we're recording about that. But I think it's
Okay.
just, more of a sense of it's a perfect onboard jumping point for new readers. And
Yes.
I think it's one that even if you're not super familiar with the Massiverse, like you can pick up enough to just like really get in and say like, oh, what's wrong with this character? Like, why is Marshall acting the way he is? And then as you start deep diving,
Right.
how it's the balance of like the work-life balance, so to speak, with the superhero life, you can really start seeing how it's taken its toll. And then he's so flawed as a character, which makes him so more appealing. You see his journey just getting started, especially now. It looks like he's in way over his head, but it's brilliant.
One other thing that Ken won't mention, it didn't mention is before you got on, he really did appreciate the fact that you did the previously on Radiating
Yes.
Black, that whole first page, just to catch everybody up. Like he said, it is a perfect jumping on point for newer readers. So yeah, that's just really smart to do because you kind of hear it in your head as you're reading
I like all of that.
it.
I'm giving
we'll,
you
we'll
nothing.
slide in the DMs later.
Yeah. No, it was an intentional approach that we took for this to not only, as I said, be a really good jumping on point, but to also be something that was in direct response to the events of the Catalyst War. And, those are two that's a fun little needle to thread because you want to for longtime readers, you want to be continuing the story and for them to feel you want it to feel to them like this is a natural progression out of the first 3 years of the book that they've been reading. But for brand new readers, it also needs to feel like, as you said, like you can get everything you need to know out of this issue if you were to pick it up cold. And the bits that are specific to the new status quo, hopefully those are dynamic and interesting on their own in a way that will like it's the promise of the premise of like what we're going to do and what's to come. If you want to go back and read the first 30, or 30.5 issues, like absolutely, there's a ton of story there.
Yes.
But also, if you wanted to just start right now, like it's a new era where we're going to be teaching you the things from that matter from the Catalyst War, like on the fly. So you won't be lost as we deal with some of the fallout from, what exactly happened in the story leading up to this point. But I actually kind of like tackled issue 31 in particular as in the spirit of an issue one. And if you look at it, it's kind of modeled after Radiant Black #1 in some ways as well. Like it literally opens with a splash page of a phone screen that has complications on it, and it ends with a heartfelt speech from the main character that recontextualizes some things you thought you knew from during the issue, and also gives something of a little bit of both a mission statement for the book, but also for Marshall as he is embarking on this new era and journey that he's on here to become the type of Radiant Black that he thinks the world really needs. How the world exactly feels about him, especially coming out of the Catalyst War, and the way that narrative can often be co-opted against your will. Those are going to be some of the big challenges that he faces here, as not only is he looking to level up, but Chicago is looking to rebuild. And it's not going to be nearly as simple as he hopes it will be. And that's kind of the backdrop to a lot of the big things we're doing, and the new villains and the new threats and the new conspiracy theories and groups that are going to be coming out of all of this, and what exactly they think happened and how and why they're looking to hold Radiant Black accountable. It's going to be it's going to be a lot of fun for us as readers and creators, maybe less so for the characters, but time will tell.
I mean, I'm already sold, but I mean, I'm now hyped up about hearing like we have new villains coming. We have a lot of new stuff happening too, because like I say, how Radiant Black is defining the modern superhero is really something I think fans are gravitating towards more and more, and especially now kind of hitting the reset button to let more jump in, I think such a brilliant move. Tom?
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So, you know, you mentioned the fact that this is a big, huge creator-owned property. What are some of the things that you've learned the hard way about doing this, especially everybody in the whole black market narrative, taking on something like that?
Yeah. I'd say there's probably two or three things. I think it's constantly a battle is too strong a word, but it's constantly a conversation. And you need to just be really honest with yourselves about when you're trying to do something really ambitious and whether, for lack of a better descriptor or analogy, whether the juice is worth the squeeze or not. And with something like there are certain things we've done over the past 4 years. I keep saying that we're entering year 4, and Michael keeps reminding me we're entering year 5, which
Yeah.
I refuse to acknowledge because that would mean a lot of things about myself and my age and everything else. But we're entering year 5 here, and there are things we've done over the prior 4 years that absolutely worked. Super happy with them, super proud of them. There are other things we wish we could not. It's not that we wish we didn't do them. It's that we wish we could tweak them potentially. And in particular, I think about things like the Catalyst War, and like I am so immensely proud of that story, and everyone on the creative team is as well. And I stand by it 1000%. And we stuck the landing. I really, really, really feel that. The way that we rolled it out was really important to me because I felt really strongly that, if you're talking about committing to the bit, like the idea of exploring another timeline or telling a multi-timeline story using a variant cover as a storytelling mechanism is something that no one's ever done in comics, but it also feels so inherently it just feels right. Like it feels like it makes sense where you're going to use an alternate cover to explore an alternate timeline. And I think though, it's one thing to do something really, really cool. And even to do something really, really cool, really, really well. But if no one understands what you're doing, it doesn't matter how cool it is. And I think that you have to constantly weigh the communication as well as the accessibility against the really cool idea. And I think when it's a one-off thing, when it's something like the Radiant Black versus Blaze short film, it's like there are going to be people who don't scan that QR code and don't realize that there is a big secret animated short film, right?
Yeah.
That's fine. The issue still works entirely without that. Yeah. Something like No One, same thing. Like last year, I would say that of the people that when I was doing conventions and signings and things like that, anytime someone brought me a copy of No One to sign, I would say that probably half of those people did not know there was an in-universe audio series where the story actually continued and did different things, and they go back and forth between these two formats, right? And the other half that did know that there was an audio series, I would say about half of them had never listened to it.
Really?
But if you were to just read the comic, you get the full story in the comic. You don't get the full experience that way, but you still get the full narrative. And I think then when you look at something like the Catalyst War, where it's like, no, you can't just read the regular numbered issues. You have to read the 0.5 issues. It's intrinsic. This whole concept, everything narratively relies on that and is dependent on that. And while the concept of like using the 0.5 issue and the variant cover as a storytelling mechanism to explore, another timeline, like is really, really cool. I think that's one of those cases where it's like, should have just done it as sequential numbering. And so rather than, originally it was going to be 26 A cover and B cover, 27 A cover, B cover. And it was a challenge with retailers and readers for everyone to understand what we were doing. And it's a very challenging time right now, just with a lot of things going on, a lot of books for retailers to be across. And so we ended up changing once we saw the numbers come in, the ordering numbers. We were like, okay, this clearly didn't track. Like people didn't understand what we were doing. So we changed it into, the 26 and 26.5, 27, 27.5, right? And in hindsight, what I would probably do now is do 26 and 27, 28 and 29, 30 and 31, and just, eat the component of it where it's like alternate cover / number for alternate timeline. It's like, is the juice worth the squeeze on that one? I still think it's really, really cool. In hindsight, maybe it wasn't the best choice because of the amount of confusion that it created and the friction towards accessibility that it might have also created. So that's probably the biggest thing that I learned and have a takeaway on. And, it's like I tell this story all the time, but like I've heard comedians like in different roundtables, like there was a thing years ago where there was a bunch of comedians talking with Chris Rock, and they were talking about how he like repeats his setup over and over. Like it's become like a stylistic quirk in his comedy. And he ends up saying that like, well, actually it's on purpose because he feels like if the audience doesn't understand the setup, they're never going to laugh at the punchline.
Right.
And the same thing. It's like, how do you make sure that you're creating a premise and a setup, even with the outside the box stuff, that's easy to follow, and if not follow, it's easy to figure out, so that all the cool work is not, it's not lost and feeling inaccessible as a result.
Yeah, because I mean, you guys take so many chances and educated chances. It's not, like doing the podcast, that's something new that definitely fits in now. And doing the QR codes, that's something that's definitely now. And doing that to connect to the audience, I think is just something that we as comic readers really need, because it really challenges us. Because every time you pick up an issue, it's almost like you got to go over with a fine-tooth comb, so to speak, to find everything in there. But that's the fun of being a reader, is like you want to be checking that out, not have everything spoiled on the internet, and just really just have that experience in there. And especially with what you guys have done over the years, has there ever been a project that you're like, after you got done with it, you're like, wow, like I can't believe we did that? Or is there one that you're thinking like, without spoiling anything, obviously, anything that you're just like dream bucket wish list, like I wish we could do this with the books?
Sorry, can you say that? Can you say that one more time?
Sure. So like, for example, like with the podcast with no one, when you were kind of in the stages of this, was a situation like with a element like that, or like with the QR code movies or doing the audiobooks, I would say one, has been your like proudest accomplishment with that? Like the one that you stood out, you're just like, I've
Sure.
always wanted to do that and I got the chance to do it. And then two, without spoiling anything, because in case something's in the works, is there always something like on a dream bucket list, like I want to do this with Radiant Black?
Oh, sure. Yeah. It's a good question. I mean, the secret short film, the animated short film is, I'm really, really, really proud of that, especially because I mean, to this day, like that's one of the things that we keep putting clips up from, and they've like in the last couple of weeks, they've been blowing up on Instagram and TikTok, and YouTube to some extent, but certainly on Instagram and definitely on TikTok. And it's really rewarding to know, like, okay, like this is it is as cool as I hoped it was, and at least anyway, like people finding it and seemingly really enjoying it. And I think that was something that was a really big, heavy lift to pull off, and we knew it was going to be. But on the flip side, the reason we did it animated is because we were going to do it live action, and with COVID and this really big cartilage transplant that I was going in for in my knee, first of a few now, it just became clear at a certain point. It's like I just knew, it's like I can't pull this off. Like we just don't have enough pieces in place. We're not going to be able to pull this off in time. And so I audibled into like, all right, what's another way to do the same type of thing? And of course, it's like, well, we're doing comics, so doing a cartoon or an animated things, like those feel very, very, connected. Those make sense together.
All right.
So,
No, I mean, I'm sorry. I'm just blown away by the live action. I never knew that story. Wow.
so
Well,
speaking
there
of
was
everything always
actually,
being, oh, go ahead,
oh no, no, I
please.
was just gonna say, I don't know if I've told anyone this before. Before the game plan, so Radiant Black is set in Lockport, Illinois, which is where it's my hometown. Well, I'm from Homer Glen, which is one town over, but I went to high school in Lockport. So it's set there, and in February of 2020, as we were building the book, I was home for C2E2, and I was literally like driving around downtown Lockport, and I popped into the comic store, Amazing Fantasy, where I've gone forever. And it was the owner of Amazing Fantasy, Joe Gentile. He actually connected me with the mayor of Lockport, and so I was texting with the mayor of Lockport because I was already planning. Oh shoot! Like we got to do a live action thing, like a live action teaser to launch this book with. And I blame my friend Ramon Palermo for that because he and I were texting that morning and he was like, "We got to do." I'm like, "No, no, no!" And then of course, like an hour later, I'm like, "Oh, that'd be really cool." And remember, we had done the big live action Shattered Grid promo with JDF and everything when I was doing Power Rangers, and Ramon was one of the producers on that, and so I was like, no, you're right. We should do that. And so I was actually in the works, like figuring out like, can we pull this off? Like, can we shoot? Like, can the mayor help me with permits, so we can do this? But then that was end of February of 2020. And I don't know if you guys remember how the world went in March, but
Yeah.
very quickly it was like, oh yeah, we can't do this. This is impossible. So we were
It
going to
was
do
an
something. I
alternate
was actually going
timeline.
to there you go. That's the alternate timeline that I do definitely want to explore. But sorry, Tom, I didn't mean to cut you off there. I know you're on the clock too here.
No, it's quite all right. So, you saying that everything is always all connected, one of the big things that we get out of the Black Market narrative is supermassive. So,
Yeah.
what can we talk about how the Catalyst War is going to possibly affect Supermassive 2025?
Well, that's a good question. I guess this is a good time to tell everyone. So we're not going to do a supermassive 2025 this year.
Oh,
So we are just doing Radiant Black and Rogue Sun.
Okay.
And then, like I said, Inferno Girl Red Book 2. But we decided to take 2025 off from it. And I think in large part it's because we want to make sure that we shore up the core titles and we are there consistently for not only readers but retailers in a way that we're not only reliable but also we're not a huge footprint. Like we want to be efficient in doing really cool stuff and we want to get people onto the core books. And I think, there are a lot of reasons why we've done as much as we've done up to this point every year. And some of that I can talk about one day and some of it I won't. But like there are reasons why we've done everything when we've done them. And like no one in particular, no, that's one I can talk about. Like the reason we did no one when we did it, despite having not only the Catalyst War, but also Red and more of Dead Lucky and like everything that was going on was because there was a larger play behind the scenes with regards to the feature film that we're now making for No One. And the film only works if the comic and audio series are out first.
Mhm.
And so it becomes a little bit of a thing where it's like we have to go make this now because it's going to be a year from the time we finish it. It's going to be a year before we're really even able to get a film into the right position to, start teasing, much less put out. And so every year you wait, it's like you're adding 2 years at least onto that. And so with our financiers and everything for the film, it was like, we had to come through on this. But I do think that like with the state of the market and everything, I don't know that expanding is the right move or anything like that. Like I think it's more about like making sure that we're consistent. And if that means doing fewer books in order to maintain that level of consistency, I think in the long run, that is the more prudent approach. and we're not going anywhere. Like there will be plenty of time for more supermassives. But in particular, like I just want to make sure that the core books are like really on track right now and like firing on all cylinders before we do anything additional.
It's quality over quantity.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And anytime you see Massiverse on a title, you know you're getting high quality. It's literally the most exciting universe in comics without question. And all you have to do is pick up an issue, read it, and you find out exactly why. I know we're running short on time but I'm glad we got to at least hear a little bit about the No One Project, because if anybody hasn't checked that book out, and the podcast too, you need to do it all at once. I did it. Truly one of the best stories I've had the experience of taking in. And trust me, when Radiant Black 31 drops at the shelves on the comic shops, it's going to be a start of a whole new era that fans simply cannot miss. Kyle, thank you so much for taking the time out to talk to us. We definitely have to chat again soon.
My pleasure. Yeah, let's do it again. And let's not wait another 2 years for it.
Yes, absolutely. We have to do
That
that.
just feels like yesterday.
Yes. All right. On behalf
Thanks
of
so much, guys.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. On behalf of Tom and myself, we'll end it like we always do on here on Turn a Page. When you're at the comic shops and you have a great issue in your hands, such as Radiant Black 31, which is dropping February 26th, and you see somebody struggling to find something, hand yours off to them. Tell them to turn a page. We'll see you next week.
I'm out.
It's such waste of time, swiping left and swiping right on people you could know. Cause anyone who's worth a damn be worth way more than a picture could ever show. You could find the right light, find the right angle, and never find your soul. And it can feel like a losing battle, and this pot is full of holes. This modern way of finding love just makes me feel so alone. And I can't be the only one sick of staring at my phone. So look up, talk to me, a better way to spend our energy. Just look up, talk to me. We don't have to float alone on the open sea. Don't know that I believe in the old time fable. Everyone has just one true love. All I know is you're across this table, and you're all I'm thinking of. So look up, talk to me, a better way to spend our energy. Just look up, talk to me. We don't have to float alone on the open sea. Talk to me. Talk to me. It's such waste of time, swiping left and swiping right on people you could know. Whoa.